Welcome to this week's edition of World Crisis Radio. This is Webster Tarpley reporting this week once again from home base here in Washington, D.C. Now, we're going to give you a report on the very important intervention of the Tax Wall Street Party into the Left Forum in New York City last weekend that left the forces of limited hangouts, the forces of the color revolution are reeling as a result of that powerful intervention. It basically saved the Left Forum from being taken over by a nefarious British front group. But we have to go first to the financial front. And this, of course, involves Greece. We're going to be getting, if all goes well, we'll be getting a report from Athens at the beginning of the second hour from our fine correspondent there, Michael Chiotinis. But we've got to talk about the general situation first. Pardon me. Are we dealing with Europe of the banks and cartels? Yes, indeed we are. The Europe of the Schäubeles and the Draghis and the Hollandes. That's the Europe of the banks and the cartels, and they are bearing down on Greece. But this is not so simple. In the past 24 hours or so, Greece has announced that they will postpone a payment, and I think this is one going to the International Monetary Fund, of about 300 million euros that Greece was supposed to pay on January 5th. You remember last week we talked to Michael Chiotinis, and he pointed us to today, that is this Friday, the 5th of June, that this is when Greece is supposed to make a 300 million euro payment. The Greek government says, we have that money, we have that cash, we could pay you, but we're not going to pay you. This is, of course, an option, perfectly legitimate, built into the agreement. It's built into the agreement. It's not default. It's not breaking anything. It's simply a cash management option that the Greek government has, and it's written into the deal. But now what we're looking towards is the countdown to the 30th of June. The 30th of June. And I guess it's beware the kalends of July, the 1st of July. So watch out for what happens here at the end of June. So we're talking about the transition from the second quarter to the third quarter. That's now looming as the big one. Often it's, September to October. Not this time. It's June to July. At that point, in theory, the Greek government is supposed to pay 1.3 billion euros. Will this happen? Well, it will only happen if these characters from the Troika, the institutions, the European Commission, the European Central Bank, and the ultra-nefarious International Monetary Fund of Madame Lagarde, they've all got to cough up money. And indeed, the way this European construct has been put together, this was not the most clever. It looks like most of the parliaments, at least of the Eurozone, and quite possibly even others, I don't know, will have to vote on whatever deal emerges. So you're really, with all of that rigmarole, you're looking at probably a 2 to 3 week window at the most, not really the 4-week window that this would suggest. So we're going to the brink. We're going to the brink. And make no mistake, this is the brink. Don't listen to that German propaganda, the siren song of Schäubele sitting in his wheelchair and telling us, well, don't worry. It won't be a world banking panic. It won't be a world breakdown crisis because we've taken the countermeasures. Baloney. Don't tell me about the capitalization of your banks. It's insignificant compared to the losses that can be generated with modern derivatives, the ones that you have invented and cultivated, dear Wall Street and City of London and Frankfurt financier oligarchs, the credit default swap, in particular, the collateralized debt obligation, and all the rest of those derivatives. They will sweep away much of the existing architecture. Now, we're told in an interesting discussion on National Public Radio this morning that the United States is appealing to the European Union, that is to say to Monsieur Junckers. Monsieur Junckers has been told, please don't blow this up. And I guess Schäubele and Madame Merkel have been told, please don't blow this up. You're taking the entire system to the brink. So the U.S. message to the European Union, both in Brussels and to Draghi in Frankfurt, European Central Bank, and to Berlin, don't blow up the world because of your silly difference of opinion with Greece, right? It's not worth it, right? As another official might say, I don't care what you do with Greece, right? Avoid the breakdown crisis of the world. So let's see now what has happened even more recently. A couple of days ago here, May 31st, Alexis Tsipras article in Le Monde, Europe at the Crossroads. Now, he goes through the failures of austerity. Why austerity is a disaster. 5 years of Troika, 5 years of memorandum. By memorandum, of course, they mean the letter of intent, the conditionalities that are imposed in order to get the IMF seal of approval, a seal of approval from a homicidal madman. But, of course, that's the way the world works. The Greek people have paid a price. The unemployment rate over 5 years went to 28%, 60% for young people. Average income down by 40%. And it's the highest social equality in Europe. Public debt from 124% to 180% of GDP. Sacrifices. Trapped in continuous austerity, as the Financial Times guy on NPR said today. Greece is in a debtor's prison. Interestingly, what you see here, the Financial Times line is a haircut for the investors, a haircut for the bondholders is inevitable. Now, you can see what it is. The U.S. and the British are telling Europe, eat those losses, eat those losses. They're nothing compared to the losses you're going to have if Greece leaves and your entire system begins to crumble and fall apart. So we're going to the brink. I'm thinking of Nicholas Nickleby, I guess, is the Dickens novel about debtor's prison and related things. So back to the article by Tsipras here in Le Monde. He says it is not true that we have not made concessions, and he goes through a whole list of concessions. And of course, he points out that there are important things here, such as parts of Greek society that were flagrantly ignoring the tax laws, and the Troika didn't care, right? The Troika, of course, is the class-based organ of the financier oligarchy, right? The imperialist finance bourgeoisie, if we want to put it that way. So that's who the Troika is serving. But Tsipras says that, look, we're carving a lot of this back out of the oligarchs. We're forcing them to pay for television licenses. The political elite is going to be called to pay their fair share. There's tax fraud going on, the triangular transactions, customs and tax controls to reduce smuggling and tax evasion. So all of these things, which actually in theory should be pleasing to the Troika, have not been enough, right? The Troika says that's not enough. We want to attack pensions. We want to attack the poorest and most defenseless. Back in a minute on World Crisis Radio. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. We have to fault the Canadian government, mightily, a neo-McCarthyite regime in Canada. You can be a great creative artist like Madame Lissitsas, and you're going to be banned for your political opinions? Shame on Canada. All this hypocrisy that they were somehow freer and more able to provide liberty. Baloney. It's not happening. Look at that guy Harper. He's a neocon. Look at the Tsipras. Canadians put an end to this neo-McCarthyism. I'd get that woman reinstated. She's a great artist. She does not deserve this. Just because she has a soft spot for Donetsk, as do we. And we're going to talk about this in just a minute, because Donetsk is now under unprecedented fascist attack. And we're going to turn to that in just a second. But now the big picture in the world is this financial situation. So, at any rate, in Le Monde on the 31st of May, Tsipras goes through a whole series of things that they've done, concessions that they've made. They've agreed to propose, to prolong, to delay, to temporize. Why the liquidity blockade on the Greek economy? Greece is trying to pay. They have paid more than 17 billion euros in interest and amortization. That's about 10% of GDP since August 2014 without any external funding. Now, what is the demand of the Troika? It seems to be once again looting pensions. They're not interested. You can put the screws on the fat cats and the oligarchs. No, that doesn't count. They want to see austerity against the helpless parts of society. Okay. The other thing is labor. They say, we want reforms. And indeed today on this national public radio, they're all prating about reforms. In oligarch speak, reform means you're stripping somebody of their rights. That's what's called reform. So the ability to fire somebody, hire and fire, that's a reform. No, that's not a reform. That's turning the clock back to the Dickensian world of hire and fire, which we have here in the United States. Nobody in his right mind should want this. So what they're saying is the position from Tsipras is the European institutions are demanding a degradation of the Greek labor market, which is below the standards which the European Commission and European Parliament have promulgated for the European labor market. In other words, they're demanding that the Greek government flagrantly violate European labor legislation. All right. And then pensions, we've heard about it. Almost half of all pensioners in Greece receive a pension which places them below the threshold of poverty. And 23% more live in danger of poverty and social exclusion. So, why is there a crisis, says Tsipras? It is due to the insistence of certain institutional actors, Schäubele, Draghi, Juncker, who insist on submitting absurd proposals and displaying a total indifference to the recent democratic choices of the Greek people, despite the fact that they'd said they would have to make some kind of concession. Is it careerism? Is it that somebody like Schäubele has been wrong so much that he can't admit it because that would be the end of him? No, it is a European strategy, he says, that essentially goes for a two-speed Europe. The core, the wealthy part, will set the tough rules regarding austerity with a super finance minister and the European Central Bank with unlimited dictatorial powers, harsh punishment, mandatory austerity, more restriction than the movement of capital, and so forth. Now, the warning, here's the warning. What is not being taken into account here by these Eurogarchs and Eurocrats is the huge risk, the enormous danger involved in the two-speed Europe. The strategy risks the beginning of the end of the European unification project by shifting the Eurozone from a monetary union to an exchange rate zone. It triggers economic and political uncertainty, which is likely to transform the economic and political balances throughout the Western world. We are at a crossroads. We have made concessions. The decision is in the hands of the institutions, even though these are simply front men for the leaders of the various countries. And then finally, will it be Europe of solidarity, equality, and democracy, or rupture and division? If you think it's only about Greece, you're making a mistake. Get out your copy of Ernest Hemingway, For Whom the Bell Tolls. And, of course, that quote goes back to John Donne. Never send to ask for whom the bell tolls. It tolls for you. In other words, you, Schäubele, you, Draghi, your institutions will be shaken and perhaps shattered if you push Greece over the brink. And that is worldwide. As I think I said last week, one of the comments came out of the St. Petersburg meeting of the Likhatchov Scientific Conference is, once somebody leaves, once South Carolina left the Union, others followed. If Greece is going to be pushed out, because that's what it's going to be, Greece does not want to leave. The overwhelming Greek public opinion is they want to stay in it, and with good reason. With normal, rational administration, it's better to be in the European Union than to be outside. Why? Because if you're outside, you will be destroyed by speculation. You will be destroyed by credit default swaps on your national bonds, and your currency will become negative value, and your living standard will collapse, and your poverty will increase. Ask the people in Iceland. They took the advice of Michael Hudson. They didn't take my advice to declare a debt moratorium. And what happened? Their interest, the level of their currency collapsed. And that meant, since everything is imported, that their living standard also steeply declined. So that's For Whom the Bell Tolls. Now, there's even more. In the last couple of hours, we've got Tsipras here. Yesterday we saw Caruso Cabrera on CNBC, and she had two faxes. One was the Greek proposal of the last couple of days, and the other was the Troika, the institutions proposal. And she pointed out, well, there are these two competing things. Tsipras calls upon the European institutions to withdraw their proposal, to take it back. It's clearly unrealistic. It's absurd. It's a bad negotiating trick. Back in a minute on World Crisis Radio. It's the 5th of June, 2015, here in Washington, D.C., Webster Tarpley reporting. Now, we're paying a lot of attention to Greece and the international finance situation to round out the Greek picture before we go to Athens in the next hour. Tsipras, speaking in the Greek parliament today, has pointed out that the proposals of the creditors are unrealistic. The Greek government cannot consent to unreasonable proposals that call for devastating measures for pensioners and Greek families. I want to believe that this is a bad negotiating trick. It's an unpleasant surprise. We will not succumb to the irrational blackmailing demands of our creditors. So they've told the IMF that the 300 million euros are coming at the end of the month. So the Troika is running the institutions. Tsipras goes on. It's clear that even the markets know that we don't want a big blow-up, so the time is running out for Greece and for everyone. So you're getting signs of capital flight increased. You're getting a lot of pressure on Greek bonds, right? The basis points, the spread, as the Italians always say, lo spread has gone up. Gisselblum must be some kind of toxic weed. If they come up with the Gisselblum being the Dutch finance ministers and the chairman of the Eurogroup gaggle of finance ministers, if they come up with alternatives on our proposal, it should be financially correct and wise from an economic perspective. What the hell would you know You're an austerity ghoul. Your policies have failed. They're in ruins. They claim, Olivier Blanchard, IMF chief economist, claims that the IMF, the Eurocommission, and the European Central Bank have made reasonable proposals. Olivier, quelle honte. Be ashamed of yourself. That is not the case. So, what do we have? 74% of Greeks want to stay in the euro, and it would be better. But I think as Tsipras is showing, there are limits. And one of the things is maybe the 300 million euros that they had were needed for pension payments. They don't want to default on pensions, rather default on the IMF than on pensions. If Schäubele is determined to destroy the euro, there's nothing I can do here to save it. And I think that's what some people are concluding. However, now, we're looking for Portugal and the Bloco de Izquierda, the leftist bloc, to come on in. Spain, Podemos is a real force, even if Iglesias is fishy and a rotten apple. We've got all kinds of stuff going on here. Madame Lagarde, has told Yellen, keep your rates at zero, or else. The OPEC meeting in Vienna has concluded with the idea of maintaining the pump at 30 million barrels a day, right? Driving down the prices. Ultimately, this is good for economies, but bad for finance oligarchs. And again, the main thing is, if there is a chaotic Grexit, Greek exit, if there is any kind of exit, this will be a contagion. This will be a world banking panic. Mark my words. Maybe not 1 week or 1 month, but it will head that way, especially with Cameron of Britain meddling the way he does and threatening the chaotic breakup of the European Union, not even the euro, because he's not in that. And behind it all, Greece is ultimately not alone. They've got perhaps Portugal coming online, Spain coming online. That's already a much better position in the ministerial councils. Ukraine is about to blow. Ukraine will blow. We're told that this woman from Chicago, this foreigner who now has she's now the Ukrainian finance minister, that she has magical powers. No, Ukraine will blow, and they won't cough up the money because they simply can't. Once Ukraine blows, if Greece has blown or been driven out, then you got to look at what are the implications for Venezuela, what are the implications for Argentina, and what are the implications for other countries that have kept it hidden so far, right? As I think Perot said, when the tide goes out, you find out who's swimming naked. That could happen much quicker than otherwise. So, and Ukraine is obviously flailing, right? Ukraine has just named Saakashvili, the classic fascist, to be the governor of Odessa, the scene of the massacre that essentially destroyed the nation of Ukraine, made Ukraine non-viable. It will not be forgotten. And Bloomberg is already trying to tout Saakashvili as a magnet for foreign investment. I think he'll be a magnet for Nuremberg indictments. Now, so we are headed towards the brink. And again, a normal procedure. How did General Motors get saved? They got a write-off about half of their debt. How was Chrysler saved? About half of their debt was written off. It's a Chapter 11 bankruptcy, if you want. With a country, you're not going to do that. That can all be done simply through the haircut mechanism, right? Get out the pinking shears, and you begin to go to work on that bonded debt. Now, shifting away from economics and now into just the question of Lagarde, right? Why is Lagarde telling Yellen to keep the Federal Reserve interest rates at zero? What she seems to be citing is countries in Southeast Asia which are on the brink, in addition to the ones that I've mentioned, countries in Southeast Asia that are on the brink, they're teetering. And the idea is if the U.S. interest rates go up, a lot of that Southeast Asian debt is bonded debt in U.S. dollars. Those interest rates will go up when it has to be rolled over. Those might even be euro dollar interest rates. That will then push some of those Southeast Asian countries into some kind of crisis. So Lagarde is trying to safeguard the interests of the finance oligarchy worldwide, giving Yellen orders. And as was said today, that's what the IMF always does. You get upset if the IMF is giving the U.S. orders. Deal with it. That's what they do to every country in the world. Now, whether you follow them or not, that's another story. So, Ukraine. We have just had another attack by the Ukrainian fascist Soldateska, the Kiev forces, attacking places in the Donetsk People's Republic. Now, the areas we're talking about are Telemanova, and related areas. And these places have been bombarded by artillery and we believe Grad rockets coming from the Kiev side. The Kiev spokesman, this guy Lysenko, right? Whether he's he's got a theory of evolution, I don't know. He's not very evolved himself. Lysenko says that the Kiev forces now officially refuse to pull back tanks and heavy rocket launchers and heavy artillery from the front line. In other words, Kiev today officially said we are disregarding, we're against the Minsk II Accord. We're violating it, and we're even telling you that we're violating it because of something the rebels, Donetsk People's Republic, allegedly did. So we'll be talking about this more in that segment. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. So the fighting on the territory of the Donetsk People's Republic is in the area of Marinka, Maryinka, and Krasnochorivka, outside Donetsk. Now, I'm guessing that these places are in that critical area northwest of Donetsk, close to the Prokofiev International Airport. And it looks to me like this is the following. There was just a conference in Paris about the situation there in Ukraine, eastern Ukraine, at the European Union. And this seems to be the gambit of Poroshenko and Yarosh, his fascist right-hand man. They want to blow this up because obviously the Ukrainian artillery starts firing. They announce that they're not pulling back according to the Minsk. They say, we are officially violating the Minsk II Accord, says Poroshenko and his forces. So bad news. And therefore they start shooting, and then they blame it on Donetsk, right? This by now should be a fairly clear pattern. By the way, we call him Poroshenko because his policies are obscene. So this Poroshenko character and his Soldateska are the guilty parties. They are the aggressors. And now we're left with, the calls are now multiplying that there should be no lifting of the sanctions on Russia, and indeed that they should be increased. Well, the sanctions are obviously a major irritant. However, economically, the effect is not that much, as a distinguished Russian educator told me the other week in St. Petersburg, right? The average Russian doesn't feel it. He only knows when he sees articles about it in the newspaper. So, we have this soccer scandal going on. If it goes in the direction of questioning whether the World Cup goes to Russia, you'll see that Putin was probably right on that for whatever strategic importance soccer may have. And I guess in today's world it can. The Ukrainians say there are 9,000 Russian troops on their border. Well, that's fairly normal. I've been through that border now 4 times, and I didn't see any Russian tanks. You can't tell. A lot of, people are not identifiable by their uniform, but Russian forces, regular Russian forces, have a Russian uniform, and that you can tell. So, the Financial Times revealed that they have an old oligarch who comes to their offices once a week. Now, once you say old oligarch, we go back to this famous anthology by Francis Godolphin, my old professor at Princeton, who did the Greek historians. And one of the Greek historians is a guy who was thought to be Thucydides, but then not. And he's called the old oligarch. So the Financial Times now has an old oligarch. There's also the interesting question of the Crimean land bridge, right? There was all this brouhaha that Russia was about to seize the entire coast of the Sea of Azov, the entire north coast of the Black Sea, the entire Pontic steppe, the flatlands north of the Baltic, the Black Sea, and get that land bridge to Transnistria. Well, none of that has happened, but nevertheless, the attack goes on, right? And a lot of very ugly propaganda coming out of this. Vitaly Churkin at the United Nations says that Kiev is deliberately trying to punish the population, civilians of the Donetsk People's Republic, because they support the Donetsk People's Republic. In the last couple of broadcasts, I have tried to show you why it makes good sense to support the Donetsk People's Republic. The Kiev regime is a bunch of rotten oligarchs. Kolomoisky in the lead, even though he's, for the moment, he's collecting his coupons from Switzerland or someplace like this. Now you're getting the madman Saakashvili as a governor appointed. It's a government by foreigners. Finance minister's a foreigner, an American woman. Saakashvili is a foreigner. He's a Georgian. So it's the IMF working through a cosmopolitan caste to try to impose those cuts. So remember, the nationalization of the banks, the railroads, the coal, the electricity, the creation of a public sector, including supermarkets and collective farms, if you want it, the 3-child per family encouragement with all kinds of advantages if you're willing to do that. In other words, the policy of President Zakharchenko, back to the state, worked out in detail by Boris Litvinov. This, I think, is it's a real obvious reason to prefer the side of the Donetsk People's Republic. So, of course, the people here in the West either don't know it or they just can't fathom it. So, you put this all together, and it's a big problem. Now, let's just say a couple of things about what should happen with Greece. If it's true, as National Public Radio is telling us, that the U.S. Treasury and others are calling into Europe to say, don't break up the euro over this issue with Greece. It's not big enough. They would otherwise say, not big enough. Well, remember, the Greek defense minister said that he would prefer, out of all the countries to get a financing package from, the U.S. Now, if Lagarde can give orders to the IMF, how about Obama acting like a president instead of this wimp, sometimes slowing down, sometimes putting on the brakes, but not breaking decisively with the policy of brinksmanship and adventurism? The United States could easily finance Greece out of this thing, right? Just step in and say, in order to avoid Greece being included in the Chinese sphere of influence, we will reassert the traditional friendship of the United States to Greece, and we will finance their way out of it, and the austerity will be lifted. That would be enough goodwill to last for 1,000 years. And if the U.S. doesn't do it, who should do it? Well, we're told there's this BRICS bank, the BRICS bank. Well, where is it? It's nice to have it, but what are you going to do? Put it on a shelf? It's got to get in there. It's got to get in there, as I've said, for Venezuela, for Argentina, for Egypt, and for Greece. Get in there, you BRICS bank, and finance the Greek situation. And don't do it with this greedy stuff, right? Don't do it with this idea that you're going to privatize everything and buy it up, because that will simply not fly. Now, those are some things that ought to be done. Otherwise, we haven't really been to the brink of financial breakdown crisis now in a little while, right? We're 7 years almost into the crisis, right? The 7 years, as I had occasion to say at the Left Forum, which we'll talk about in the second hour. At the Left Forum in 2013, I pointed that out, right? If you go from 1929 to 1936, you see what? In 1936, you see the French Popular Front, communist socialist government with trade unions with interesting reforms. You see the coming of labor upsurge to the United States, leading to the United Auto Workers, the United Steel Workers, and the other unions. They come from precisely that 36, 37, 38 time frame. Well, this time around, we're 7 years into the Depression, 2008 to it'll be September 2015. Have we had a mass strike upsurge? Yeah, we have. In Greece, a mass strike upsurge that found competent and adequate leadership, Tsipras and Syriza. In Spain, something similar, which has found incompetent leadership in the form of Iglesias. In other places, in the United States, from Ferguson to Staten to Baltimore, incompetent leadership is called. We'll talk about the mass strike is here and has been. Back in a minute. Welcome to our second hour here on World Crisis Radio. This is Webster Tarpley reporting from Washington, D.C. But now let's go directly to Athens, Greece, in many ways the epicenter of this current crisis that obviously threatens the entire world financial system and the politics around it swirling. So our wonderful correspondent Michael Chiotinis is on the line. And Michael, I understand we've tried to lay out the Tsipras article in Le Monde, Tsipras' speech in the Parliament today, and you want to add to that. So please go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much. Now, Wednesday night, Greek Prime Minister Tsipras met with the President of the European Commission, Jean-Claude Juncker, who presented him a proposal for an agreement forgetting everything that has been discussed in the last 4 months between Greece and the lender institutions. That was actually the reason why he convened a meeting of all political parties' leaders in Parliament today. Right before all this, Tsipras had sent a 47-page complete proposal to the lender institutions. In the same time, let me add, Schäubele made a statement saying, I haven't found the time to read the Greek proposal yet. What is he really saying? He's saying, I don't care about the Greek proposal. He's trying to show utter contempt for what the Greek government proposes. So why such audacity from the part of Schäubele, if not the only thing that's on the table is the humiliation of Syriza? Now, Tsipras, of course, stated that the proposal that Juncker gave him couldn't possibly be the basis of any discussion. But let's see.
These are the absurd demands, right? The absurd.
Yeah, but
right?
Let us see a couple of short points included in this proposal, because I think it shows a lot about what the real goals are here. I'm sorry, it's really funny, if not tragic. One is the abolishment of the reduced VAT, the value-added tax for Greek islands, which is just a balancing measure for their economies, because they face much higher prices due to the cost of transportation of goods by ship.
Right.
And so that's a hit on the island. And the other is an increase by 10 percentage points in the VAT, the value-added tax for energy. This will simply destroy any industry left in the country and also put tens of thousands of households out of electricity, into darkness, back to the Stone Age. Now, these two alone...
By the way, it's a highly regressive tax.
Yes, regressive tax. The worst kind of taxation. These two alone, these two measures included, let alone all the other things in the proposal, would destroy any economic activity left in the country and, very importantly, quite simply assassinate any remaining competitive advantage of the Greek economy, namely the islands, because it's sad, but that's all that's left here. Now, why are they doing this? Let me give you a quick reminder. Greek unemployment is officially 27%, a frightening number, but a number that barely captures the severity of the situation. It doesn't count discouraged workers who have given up and have put themselves out of the labor force altogether. It doesn't count so-called freelancers, self-employed, people who own small businesses, who have no real income, as any income goes towards rent and taxes. So, and income has fallen very much. So they are in fact a kind of hidden unemployment. Taking into account all these, real unemployment is closer to 40% or more. But 5 years of this policy, and the Europeans insist Greece needs more of it. Why? Why is that? Well, I'm sorry to say, but unfortunately we have come to a sad realization. The Greek economy is being deliberately destroyed. The aim...
Michael, we got this problem again. Reverend Pinkney's on the line. You know how it works. He's got that meter going in the background. Can we have you wait, and we'll be back to you as soon as that's over. Thank you very much for your patience. But as everybody knows, Reverend Pinkney's in jail, so he has a special humanitarian issue. So please, let's talk to Reverend Pinkney. Reverend, this is Webster.
Hey, Webster, I'm glad to have you back.
Thank you. I got to tell you, we were at the Left Forum, right? The Tax Wall Street Party was at the Left Forum in New York City, and we devoted a large part of one of our panels. We had Daniela Walls get up and give a detailed outline of your case, the charges, the tampering with the jury, the perjury by the members of the jury, and the various things that have gone on. So that was all taped, and that I think will expand the public knowledge of your case. And of course, the room was pretty much full for most of this as we did it. So that's just to begin with. So please take it away.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, I have great news here. I'm at the Lakeland Correctional Facility in Coldwater, Michigan. We call it the penitentiary. We have completed, we got the transcript, the jury transcript for the trial. And here's the good news. I have read it completely, and believe me, nobody will believe what I have just read. It will be impossible for that case to even have went to the jury. They had absolutely nothing, not a single piece of evidence that said that Reverend Pinkney did anything or anybody else did anything. They simply went after me. But here's the good news. The February 27th transcript and the April 14th transcript will be ready within the next 3-4 weeks, and then we can go straight to the appeal court. We can't go to the appeal court until I get the transcript for February 27th and also April the 14th, and we're moving forward. And we know for a fact that what's going on here is just a political move to try to neutralize me. But I'm here to tell you, they'll never be able to neutralize me. I'm fighting from deep inside this prison system, and I want people to know that we're fighting and we're going to win this fight. But it's not about Reverend Pinkney. I want people to understand this. It's crucial that people don't think it's about me. Because if they can put me in jail, that means that the movement ends. The movement has continued without me, which is great news. You don't get anything better than this. But let me talk a little bit about this prison right now. This is something that nobody in a right mind would believe. Just the other day, we had what they call sloppy joes. The whole container fell on the ground, on the floor. They scraped it up from the floor, put it back in the container, and served it to the prisoners. In Jackson, Michigan, they found maggots all in the food. And here, the food is so bad that you wouldn't even serve it to a dog. It's just that bad. Nobody can believe it. And when people are talking about it, really all over the state, about how bad Aramark is. But the governor supports Aramark 100%. Now, Aramark is a $14 billion corporation. And they're here inside this prison. And what they're doing to the prisoners here is serving them food they wouldn't serve to anybody else.
Hold the thought, Reverend. We're going to do the turnaround as fast as we can, but it's built in, so we'll be right back. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. This is Webster Tarpley in Washington, D.C., and we are talking to Reverend Pinkney in the Lakeland Correctional Facility in Michigan, where he is held as a political prisoner. So, Reverend, keep going. You were telling us about Aramark.
Yes. Aramark has continued to serve people bad food. Matter of fact, 125 people got food poisoning one day. Then another 90 people got food poisoning, and yet and still they won't call the health department or anything in on Aramark. And let me talk about the sleeping facilities here. They got all these people, got more than 1,400 people packed into this area, into these buildings. And it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, because what they're doing, they're stacking people in bunk beds on top of each other in a small unit, 9x12 unit. And we're like, in my cube is 5 people in my cube in an area that's 9x12. Now, how do you get 5 people to sleep in an area 9x12? It's almost virtually impossible. The clothing itself is we get 2 uniforms to wear, and you got to wear those almost until you leave here. And it's the shoes themselves is almost like walking on the sidewalk. They're bad. I got on about 4 pair of socks, and it's 80 degrees outside in order to keep my feet from hurting from wearing these shoes. But we're fighting this thing. We're showing people what we're capable of doing, and we're going to come back and we're going to do some things. I'm working with the juvenile lifers now. The ones that they gave when they was 15 and 16 years old, they gave life in prison without parole. I'm working with them. I'm trying to get people on the outside to understand how important it is to let some of these folks go home. We have people that have been here 50 years, 40 years. I mean, half the place here, when you think about it, some of these people in their eyesight is not never going home. And I'm here at this facility for one reason, because it's closer to my home, and also I can be transported back and forth from court. So that's the good thing about it. But it's a facility that I tell you, I can write a book about this facility, and believe me, it's amazing, Webster. Nobody will believe exactly what's happening here in America. And you think about being tortured and stuff like that. You're being tortured every day. These prisoners are being tortured every single day, and we have to do something about it. We got to change the way they're doing business. Show these people that that hey, I'm in here. If I'm in here and I don't belong in here, there's probably maybe 30 to 40% of the people that's here don't belong here. But we have to stand up and fight. Let the world know that there's a problem with this prison system. It got to stop, Webster. It must stop. So if you have any questions you want to ask me, go right ahead.
It sounds like the conditions, as you say, tantamount to torture or the practical equivalent of torture. Again, I suggest we got to write this up. We got to get this to international agencies because the U.S. agencies are so corrupt that generally they don't respond. You got to have somebody with an axe to grind. In other words, somebody who's been humiliated or attacked by the U.S. who wants to strike back. Well, under treaties, they can, right? Helsinki Treaty, Organization of American States, or any country under so-called human rights international law. So I would suggest that we somehow get this into a document.
Absolutely. And Webster, the thing that's so important, how they have beaten these people down to almost a pulp. You would not believe the attitudes of some of these people here. You would say, absolutely not. Nobody could think on that level. Nobody would do those things. Nobody. They have you trained. They call chow in the morning, okay? Everybody rush out to the chow hall. I never seen nothing like that before in my life. They got them trained to go rushing out. They call at lunchtime. They call chow. Everybody just busts out the door. The yard is open. Everybody just runs out to see what they're doing. They're training. They're training the prisoners, and they can see how they can train the rest of the world to do what they need to do. So we're dealing with issues here that's so amazing that I'm in total shock. I could not believe it when I first went through this because they're teaching people that people can be trained to do whatever they want them to do. And that's what we have here. It's more than torture. It's worse than torture, what they have done to the people here. They're almost worthless.
And again, if people want to help with the appeal, they certainly should. And it's bhbanco.org, right? Benton Harbor Black Autonomy Network of Community Organizations, right? bhbanco.org. Correct? That is
correct, and that is correct. And if they want to just mail a check, they can mail it to Banco, BANCO, 1940 Union Avenue, Benton Harbor, Michigan, 49022. And I tell you that I'm struggling right now in order to continue to survive because of the food condition here. I definitely don't eat the food. I try to eat one meal a day that I can buy from the store, and these prices from the store is almost ridiculous. You would not believe the cost of the food. You can buy a chicken breast in a package, but the package is so small. And it's when you talk about $3.50 and $3.60 for something like that, it's almost ridiculous. But the point is, you have to eat in order to survive. So I'm limiting myself to one meal a day to make sure that I stay healthy enough to be able to continue this fight. So I'm doing the things that need to be done, and I want people out there to know that we're at war. This is no conflict. This is the real deal. And somebody got to help with prison reform so we can start getting some of these guys out of here. And I want the listening audience to know...
You have 1 minute remaining.
I might be on the inside, but believe me, I'm fighting as hard as I can to get some of these people on the outside. And I'm doing what I need to do. Webster, I only got 1 minute left for this call, but I want you to know that, hey, I really appreciate you. You have done a tremendous job. And I give you all the praises because, hey, you deserve it, Webster. You deserve it. You and Danielle and the group, y'all have done a tremendous job, and I'm really, really proud of y'all. My wife is proud of y'all, and we're going to continue. I'm planning on being home shortly. It won't be long, but when I get home, I tell you, we're going to have a party, and we're going to have a press conference. We're going to be celebrating, and we're going to show this world what we made of.
And Reverend, the other thing I just want to call to your attention, in Italy, there's a general strike on the 12th of June against Whirlpool by the unions protesting more than 1,000 layoffs.
Oh, wow, that's tremendous. See, you just made my day now. Anytime that you
has nobody told you this? No, this is the Italian Metal Workers Unions, FIM, FIOM, and
Thank you for using Global Tellink.
And we've talked about this, and we will again. So back in a minute on World Crisis Radio. Okay, that's Reverend Edward Pinkney continuing the fight, even though he's been in that prison for several months now, and we urge you to support him, bhbanco.org, and you'll find mailing address there too. But now, back to Michael Chiotinis in Athens, and we were up to this idea that the absurdity of the Juncker's proposals seem to be the idea that you want to humiliate Greece, crush Greece. What is it? That they want primitive accumulation against Greece and turn all the Greeks into low-wage workers in German-financed companies? What do we have?
Yes, I was saying 5 years of policies dictated by Europeans. The Greek society is in ruins, and they insist Greece needs more of it. The effect of it is as follows. Anyone can be the judge of whether this was part of the plan or not, but let me give you some points I have here in my notes. Number one, an enormous pool of low and medium skilled, unemployed and desperate workers has been and is being created. Number two, they have dismantled the traditional way of living in production based on ownership in a small scale. Not that we should be aiming at that, but what we had. That is what we had, and the basis to work on and to build real industry on. Number three, the state itself, along with the social safety net and labor unions, have been and are being dismantled. Number four, skilled workforce has been and is being driven out of Greece. And number five, they have tried to give incentives for big multinational corporations to quote-unquote invest in Greece through privatizations or sellouts, for a better word, in order to gain, I think, in order to gain independence from the BRICS as much as possible. In other words, create sweatshop industry inside the immediate sphere of influence of these financiers, which is very simply all countries under the euro and the dollar. So the sad realization is that the aim here is to build sweatshop economies inside this sphere of influence of the euro and the dollar, for that matter. And indeed, inside the hardcore of the Western world. Don't forget the IMF is a big part of it, as Schäubele insisted it should be. We can point out the TPP also for this, that the plan is to cut the BRICS, the power of the BRICS. So it seems to me that the dollar versus euro battle has been put somewhat on hold since the European Central Bank also announced quantitative easing, QE, and the euro-dollar exchange rate has stabilized near parity. So the kind of social engineering implemented in Greece in the last 5 years, I don't think this was a mistake. I think it was deliberate. Of course, this deliberation is expressed in various levels of consciousness, but we can't continue talking about ideology or rules or ethics or any of these things. It never was about the lenders wanting to take their money back. That's one of the levels of rhetoric that has been used. A bank bailout was, of course, in the plan, but I don't even think that's the main point. Also, it was never about this ideological insanity about big government and neoliberalism and these kind of things. That was another level of rhetoric used, widely used. They don't care about the efficiency of the state bureaucracy. On the contrary, they care about the dismantling of even this last bit of political institution that gets in the way of a complete colonization of the weaker European economies. In other words, they designed a European political structure that guarantees that the average citizen could not have any power over the decisions that are made. And then, of course, an economic and monetary union under the dictatorship of the European Central Bank and the Maastricht Treaty to advance the social model that fits the interests of finance and the oligarchies that control big industry in Europe, mostly the competitive ones, big German industry and such industries. which of course could have the competitive advantage in a monetary union. So you see what I'm saying here?
Create this vast pool of low-wage labor. Poland would be an example, Eastern Europe, and this plays in somehow to the Ukrainian crisis because Ukraine would emphatically be part of that German-dominated low-wage labor pool.
Yeah.
So, your conclusions?
I think we have to seriously consider ways of getting out of this trap for the weaker European economies. And I think we should try to hijack the euro, or the euro should break up, because I don't know what future can these societies have in a union that imposes this kind of a social model. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. It's going to be a question of either you get Spain, Portugal, Greece, Ireland, whoever you can get. You've got to get a group of countries that attempts to take over the European Central Bank, that fights back against this stuff. You can do that more effectively from inside the euro, but then, as you say, ultimately, if Schäubele is determined to destroy the euro, well, then Schäubele will have destroyed the euro, and we'll have to take it from there. So it's unfortunate, because remember, anybody who leaves will come under instant heavy-duty speculative attack, and their living standard will be ravaged unless they can put in
capital controls or these kind of measures, I suppose you mean. And the thing is that the Greek economy is in such low levels that even a very devalued currency could have a growth effect. But we certainly need to examine the case of a hijacking of the euro, I think. And how could something like this be done here?
Having all kinds of trouble with our sound, but yes, we got to study this. In other words, we need to develop options now. We need to develop alternative scenarios. The best is if these Portuguese socialists do something. The best is if we can get a better leadership on the Podemos side in Spain. And indeed, if some revival could take place in some of the larger countries. But that's going to take a while. In the meantime, we've obviously got this chicken situation, right? If Schäubele really wants to, he can blow up the euro at the end of the month.
Yes, but I don't think that he's likely to want to blow up the weapon that he's using for social for imposing these kind of policies. I mean,
but then he's going to have to make some concessions. Let's see what they are.
Yes, but on the other hand, these concessions, if Schäuble makes concessions, other countries may go the way of Greece.
Right? And let's in the sense of resisting austerity, let's hope they do. Okay, I'm sorry, we're out of time. We're going to be focused on Greece all during June, Michael, so we need you with us. We'll see you soon. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. It's our final segment here on the 5th of June, 2015. We're shocked to find that the former Speaker of the House, Dennis Hastert, has now been implicated in pedophilia. He was the U.S. ruling class is decadent and degenerate. This is now a case in point. Hastert the bastard. And if he goes down, as it looks like he will that roll back that monstrosity that he imposed on the Postal Service? His Parthian shot in office was to force the Postal Service to pay, 3 years of social expenditures, pensions, and all that every year, hoping to mass some money that his rich friends could then cannibalize. Okay, let's look back now at this left forum. We had a wonderful intervention by the Tax Wall Street Party. We had approximately 6 forums, panels that we influenced or dominated or ordered up. There was, however, competition. The British IOS, I think it is, Independent Socialists, is that who they are? They had 25. So there was a power grab behind the scenes by this dubious Trotskyist organization out there trying to take over this thing. It's noticeable that a lot of the great poobahs were not there. Amy Goodman was not there. Michael Moore was not there. Noam Chomsky was not there. I think the most they got was Scahill. Did they get him? Amy Goodman, perhaps in decline. Maybe all of Amy's mouthing of the State Department line, her support for humanitarian bombers in people like Samantha Power, maybe that is catching up with her. I just want to make this contrast. When I went to the Left Forum for the first time in recent years in 2013, what I saw in 2013 was an obscene spectacle of all the assembled leftists fawning on Edward Snowden, drooling for Edward Snowden. They were swooning for Edward Snowden. And, of course, this is a playback, limited hangout operative. This time it's different. This time in the final forum, the final block of panels, we had a panel on ISIS. It was organized by Vox, figure in the New York left. Ray McGovern, former CIA. Wayne Madsen, former NSA. Yours truly, former nothing. No CIA, no NSA, nothing of the kind. So you figure that out. And what came out of this was a situation where the model of the color revolution and the model of the limited hangout operative, the so-called whistleblower, was under heavy attack. Gone are the days of the fawning and the drooling and the swooning. Now we're getting a critical view of these people. And the way it went was Ray McGovern, unfortunately, chose to defend the live CIA operations, the Arab Spring, the color revolutions, and the Assange and Snowden models. However, interestingly enough, Wayne Madsen, although certainly recognizing that something new was in there, I would say nothing new except a few code names and a couple of code words. Now, those can be very valuable if you're doing research, so that's perhaps understandable. But Wayne Madsen issued this stuff about Omidyar, and his summary was the material from the National Security Agency was filched and purloined by Snowden, who then apparently gave it to Glenn Greenwald, says Madsen. Greenwald then sold it to Omidyar, and Omidyar, he said, is selling it back to the NSA. Now, I don't know if that's true, but that's what Wayne Madsen had to say. You can check the films. Once that word Omidyar was out there, boy, the entire limited hangout position was in big trouble because people really resent that Omidyar is deciding what you can see and what you can't see, and that Greenwald is hoarding information so that 99% of this stuff is still secret because they've hoarded it. Those are no benefactors. Those are not public citizens. They don't care about transparency. They're nothing like that. So we also want to thank some of our new members of the Tax Wall Street Party, in particular from Texas and elsewhere, who were attacking and really this was highly effective, attacking the myth of the color revolution and the. I also went through the Bouazizi story. Maybe I'll tell that next time if there's interest. Now remember, I put out 2 years ago, how do you tell a limited hangout operation? First of all, the protagonist goes through a Damascus Road conversion, right? Ellsberg was a nuclear megadeth planner. Then he becomes a peace angel. Similarly with Snowden, he actually said Assange should be executed, but then he becomes a leaker on his own. An instant media darling is number 2, an instant media darling. And that's not what the ruling class does, the things that they don't like. Figure that out, okay, mushheads? Then the real whistleblower is ignored. In other words, it's always the anointed whistleblower who gets the inside track to the media darling status. But other people with more valid and more explosive stuff are similarly they're ignored. There's nothing new in there. Again, I would say with Snowden, we probably got about half a dozen code words out of that. Otherwise, it's everything we knew. Ellsberg, Pentagon Papers, anybody reading Le Monde knew that stuff. I did, Italian press, whatever it was. And nothing big, nothing about the Kennedy assassination, 9/11, the Arab Spring, Iran-Contra, nothing about the big intelligence issues. Then it prepares new covert operations. Ellsberg prepares Watergate, the Assange, the immediate detonator for many of these Arab Spring, color revolutions, destabilizations. And I think now in retrospect we can say that Snowden turned into a major irritant in U.S.-Russian affairs at exactly the time the neocons wanted that. And remember, it all goes back to Paolo Sarpi. Take a look. We put it out this week again in the morning briefing of the Tax Wall Street Party and the UFAA. The morning briefing has the how to tell a limited hangout operation. It is the art of saying something good about somebody while pretending to say something bad, right? Snowden pretends to be an implacable critic. Assange pretends to be an implacable critic. But in reality, what they've done is improve the public relations. So we've now got the lapse of the bulk collection. If you believe that, you are too gullible. I don't know what I can do for you. This is all a dog and pony show. You're telling me you really believe that the NSA has suddenly stopped doing bulk collection? That is beyond naive. That is so silly that I can't imagine an adult saying this stuff. Even the official commentators say there are 6 or 7 other ways that you can do all this under the existing law. The idea that little Rand Paul, that guy who wants to add $190 billion, 16% to the Pentagon budget, that little Rand has now delivered you from the clutches of the NSA, that is a fairy tale for gullible little children. And no adult should or could subscribe to that. So the Left Forum has come a long way, baby, from 2013, fawning, scraping, drooling, to 2015, when there's at least a significant body of critical view of these people. And Ray McGovern actually said that this was the first time he had ever heard anybody calling into question the bona fides of Assange and Snowden. Well, I'm sorry. Also, take a look. There's that famous Twitter where Glenn Greenwald says that I, Tarpley, am the source of the entire limited hangout critique. Check that up. Tarpley, Greenwald, Twitter. You'll see it. It's there. And we'll see you next week on World Crisis Radio.